Scribe in Black Press presents an unabridged recording of Pioneers, or Impartations, a tale of We the Immortals by Luke Warfield. Read aloud by Luke Warfield. Copyright Luke Warfield. All rights reserved. Part 1. "But it killed them," said Mrs. Wheeler, white-knuckling her napkin now. "I heard they dropped dead nary a breath thereafter, and right in front of the founding families." "Lies," said Mr. Wheeler behind a mouthful of eggs. He washed it down with a gulp of coffee, wiped his mustache, drained the rest of the cup like it were a shot of whiskey, and wiped again. He refilled the cup and sipped its contents gingerly this time. After a pause, he said, "Nothing like that has ever happened here, nor will it happen in the future, leastwise to us." "How do you know?" "Because the squire told me everything they're going to do. And the Bakers didn't drop dead. They cut up and left town." "That's not what I heard." "Are you calling the squire a liar?" "No, I didn't mean it like that." "Look, all they'll do is lay hands on us and release a blessing. A small impartation and nothing more. You've naught to fear." "But what if it's too much for us?" "It won't be." "What makes you so sure?" "Because I won't allow it." "How? Tell me." "I'll hold on to you the entire time and draw you away after you've received but a sample, and you can do the same for me." "But what if it's still too much?" Mr. Wheeler said nothing to this, and instead stuffed half of a buttered biscuit into his mouth and chewed and frowned and chewed some more. Mrs. Wheeler tossed her napkin aside and sat back with a huff, leaving her own plate of breakfast, which included a healthy portion of scrambled eggs, a slice of cooked ham, and a likewise half-slice of buttered biscuit untouched. The morning was bright and clear, and wide sunbeams burst through the windows of their modest farmhouse kitchen, white blazing shoots that bounced off the floral-papered walls and flashed across the stacks of shelved crockery. It filtered through the dried herbs dangling from the rafters and coalesced with the heat already issuing forth from the hearth. Mrs. Wheeler took the brunt of the star's barrage, for the windows were located directly behind her, and so she arose and drew the shears over them and returned to her place at the table and slid her chair out of the sunlight's path. Mr. Wheeler's eyes remained on her the entire time, yet she averted meeting them. "You sure you're all right?" "I don't know." "Where's all this coming from, and why now?" "I can't explain it. I don't feel like myself." "Are you know?" He nodded towards her belly, but Mrs. Wheeler shook her head. Mr. Wheeler sighed. "Need I remind you what sort of opportunity this is? Do you understand what this will do for us? For those dreams of yours? Why, we're being set up for all of that and more. The squire's a visionary, and those visions are being realized as we speak. And what with the new train stop and all, this little blip is proving itself to be a bona fide star on the map. I just wish we could have been here from the start, with the pioneers." "I do understand, yes. Don't think me ungrateful. Well, I don't like the way of it. There, I've told you. I hate the whole thing. The secrecy, the liturgy, the god-beast." "Great beast, you mean?" "Yes, that, the poor devil." "You eat beef, don't you? And pork and poultry?" "That's different." "What's so different about it? They're animals." "Yes, but great beasts." "Are what? Sacred?" "That's your father, the trembler, talking." "It's nothing to do with my father or the tremblers. It simply feels wrong to me, son." "Wrong." Mr. Wheeler repeated the sentiment, his mouth falling into a grimace, the sort one makes when they have bitten into something undercooked, something bloody. "Okay, let's say the old parson's right. What's the alternative? Go back to living with Clem in New Galticia? You remember what that was like for us? What we gave up for something greater? If all of this bothered you so much before, why didn't you object? Go on, let's hear it." "I don't know." This was, in fact, a lie. Mrs. Wheeler knew well what the alternative was, but the opportunity remained far too big, and they far too invested in their plan here. Though typically a sympathetic man, Mr. Wheeler had, in this case, decidedly disagreed with her point of view, and there was no way to change his mind nor their present course of action. And besides, her husband was right. She remembered what living with Clement Wheeler was like. Going back was not an option, even if it were possible. Mr. Wheeler was twisting the ends of his mustache, a tic that betrayed vexation whenever vexation found him. At length, he drained the last of his coffee and tossed his napkin on the table and stood to his feet and put his hat on his head. "I better get out there and check on Prudent. We need those joists set down before the meeting tonight."
"Must you? It's still early."
"You do want to move into that big house sometime this decade, yes?" To this point she conceded. Mr. Wheeler gripped her shoulders and kissed her on the head and stole for the door. Before stepping outside, he said, "I promise you, Garn, it'll all work out. Everything we've hoped for. Have I ever led us astray?" Mrs. Wheeler gave a wan smile, conceding to this also. "There's my girl. Now eat that breakfast." Then he was gone, and Mrs. Wheeler alone with her unease. The Wheelers arrived at dusk, dressed in their best bib and tucker. The great house, as it was called, awaited them at the end of the lane, its huge and solemn facade building in view like the front matter of some primeval fane restored to past grandeurs. The house stood 2.5 stories tall and possessed many windows, through which it feasted on the sun's rays at all times of the daylight hours. Amidst the 7-gabled roof, a feature for which the abode was becoming infamous, a trio of chimneys arose like enormous standing stones, offering up burnt tributes to the gods of a bygone age. Tonight, these great flues dispensed with smells of roasting meat and all manners of baked delectables that set the senses ablaze with want. Beyond the house, vast farmscape proliferated as far back as the syrupy mountains. The mountains, which sketched themselves across the horizon in a ghostly unbroken chain, took on the aspect of a great wall raised against some gargantuan unspeakable of the world before. Mrs. Wheeler thought she could almost make out the Lady Thyatira's colossus there. 100 years had been spent shaping that venerable icon, carved right out of those self-same massifs. Mr. Wheeler had taken her to view the monument 4 years prior to their settling in Tadlock, during their inaugural voyage across the Pan-Continental Railway. They were newlyweds then, leaving behind their natal state of New Purgland for Mr. Wheeler's ranch in New Galticia, a claim he shared with his eldest brother Clement. The Lady Thyatira, matron of destiny, stood nearly 750 feet tall and was configured in an eternal march westward. In one hand, she carried the free constitution of the Federal Republic. In the other, the blinding light of civilization, a totem of human progress and testament to mortal achievement. The icon was the tallest structure Mrs. Wheeler had ever laid eyes on, twice as large as the Ladies' Colossus in Anglicia, and 3 times the stupa of Fenimore at the capital. It seemed only appropriate that the squire's plantation should be founded here, under the eye of Thyatira's March, as the shrine was so named. The surveyors had said this land was uninhabitable, its turf too thick and stubborn, a country of failing vigor. But the squire knew better. The squire had changed all of that. The squire had uncovered the secret. Now these acres million were open for the taking, and the one who claimed the lion's share would surely monopolize the nation's agricultural commerce in perpetuity. Tadlock was at the forefront of this conquest. So too were the Wheelers. All they had to do was make it through tonight's proceedings. All they had to do was be stronger than the Bakers. When Mr. Wheeler finally halted the team, there were no other coaches or wagons outside, and, for a moment, Mrs. Wheeler wondered if they had misdated the event. But that hasty notion was quickly dispelled when the squire's manling stepped out onto the portico and bowed, ostensibly in waiting for them. The manling was dressed in tails and wore a lavish white wig with powdered cheeks and buckle shoes that flashed when they caught the light, an emblem of the squire's elaborate wealth. The squire was, in point of fact, the sole Tadlockian in possession of a manling. "Good evening, master and mistress," said the manling. "If you will leave your team and follow me, our hostlers will see to their care."
"We aren't late, are we, Bibelo?"
said Mrs. Wheeler, trying not to sound anxious.
"Right on time, ma'am."
"Where is everyone?" said Mr. Wheeler.
"At the meeting, Master Wheeler. You will be escorted there as soon as my master calls for it."
"Ah, very well. Thank you, Bibelo. Mr. Wheeler dismounted the wagon and helped Mrs. Wheeler down, and they followed the tiny humanoid into the house. The Wheelers were no strangers to the squire's estate, and yet Mrs. Wheeler always felt as if she were touring the residence for the first time. Again and again she marveled at the high ceilings, the twirling staircase, the crystal chandelier. By and by they entered the parlor, which was likewise splendidly arrayed in damask seating and darkly varnished cabinetry, all imported from Fiorin and Belmark proper. Oil lamps lit the space, their lambent glow purling off the faces of the squire's late forebears, stately men and women watching over the callers from the ornamented walls whereupon their painterly likenesses hung. In the corner of the room, a square piano, preloaded with sheet music, remained poised for action, ready to render service at a moment's notice. But the manling drew their attention to the center of the room, to the table where the Wheelers had played many a hand at Three Kings in prior stays. There, under the silver candelabra Mrs. Wheeler furtively desired for her own, lay a neatly folded stack of brown robes.
My master asks that you put on these vestments and wait here until called. Master Merritt will escort you personally.
Yes, of course, said Mr. Wheeler. The manling offered the Wheelers some refreshments, then departed the parlor and closed the door behind him. Once alone, Mr. Wheeler drew up one of the robes and examined its make. They really want us to put these on?
They are ghastly, said Mrs. Wheeler.
Mr. Wheeler grinned. Here, let me help you. After they were both dressed, they sat and sipped at their drinks and waited for the summoning. Knots tightened in Mrs. Wheeler's stomach with every breath, images of Vic and Lily Baker's deaths swirling in her mind like a building dread. No, Vic and Lily were alive. Sonny had said it. The squire had proved it. Why did her mind betray her so? She prayed silently for strength. Meanwhile, Mr. Wheeler stood and paced the floor. He looked over the room and all its decorum and commented on each piece in turn. Where do you think he filched this peculiarity? He said, pointing to this or that. Of one item in particular, he said, This one's new. It wasn't new, a fact Mrs. Wheeler kept to herself, for this was her husband's way of dealing with his own anxieties. Mr. Wheeler walked to the window and looked out into the full dark. Big moon out there. And they got those poor devils still at it. Squire drives his chattels hard. Mrs. Wheeler maintained her silence. Her Trembler upbringing had taught her to despise the institution of slavery, but this was not the time to engage in a debate with Mr. Wheeler on its moral reprehensibility. Mrs. Wheeler had been pleased by the rumors, of course, talk of outlawing human servitude altogether, though the gossip claimed manumission would be a gradual process and come with a new exclusion act sending all Dianese thralls out of the country post-liberation. But Mrs. Wheeler believed these efforts were far too little. No intelligent race, be it human or non-human, should suffer such cruelty, for it was a sin against nature and personal liberty, the latter being one of the core principles upon which the Unician Republic was built. She desperately hoped one day the Falk and Manling races also came to know deliverance. Mr. Wheeler disagreed with her position regarding non-human slaves, a fact he had made known on more than one occasion by way of long discourses over the subject of natural versus conventional slavery. According to Mr. Wheeler, slavery brought structure and meaning to those races otherwise prone to indolence. Suffice it to say, Mrs. Wheeler avoided the matter whenever possible, lest she find herself prey to another of Sonny's blustery orations. At last, the knock came.
Master, mistress, it's time.